Hi, everybody, and welcome to Part 1, Plan for Redesign Success. My name is Carrie Walski, and I am the founder and nerd-in-chief at Copilot, a local web development agency here based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. All right, so before we dive into the content today, I thought it'd be great to just ground ourselves in, why you're here, why I'm here, why are we even doing this? So you are likely watching this because you're hoping to do a new website redesign or maybe in the process of gearing up to do it. Basically, I'm here because I want you to succeed with that project. I've been working in the nonprofit sector and the web development world for about 15 years now, and about 30% of the clients that approach Copilot, my web agency, are in a position where they've newly redesigned their website and basically something went wrong. Either, maybe the person who they were working with flaked out, or for some reason the tools and the features that their website ended up having have fallen short for some reason. So as someone who's really passionate about nonprofits and the work that we do, and who has a special appreciation of how little resources many of you have to do the work that you do, I think it's really important to be able to effectively plan so that when you are ready to talk to a potential web development partner, you have all your ducks in a row and can kind of basically shortcut a bunch of the typical pitfalls that happen within these projects. I have been in the trenches, I have seen a lot, and basically I just want to make sure that you can, leap over those things before they even snag you. So that's really the purpose of today's presentation. And it isn't two parts. Basically, I just wanted to make this more manageable. So we've got part 1 and part 2, and both of them are going to cover some really important topics. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you get something out of this. Great. So just a little bit about me. I have a background in psychology and the arts. And as I said, over 15 years working in web development and the nonprofit sector. And what I mean when I say that is basically I started my career working for nonprofit organizations in marketing and also program development. And I know what it means to fundraise. I know what it means to write copy, to try to do ethical storytelling. So it's nice having that perspective because, of course, it fuels my passion for the work, the work that you do. And also it gives me a chance to have a special perspective that, some folks who are working for for-profit agencies, who work for other for-profit agencies don't necessarily have. So that can be useful, in the work that I do. So that's a little bit about me. I've also been on the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits Advisory Committee for the Tech Conference for 7 years. And so have a lot of experience doing organizing basically within the nonprofits and technology world. And then I've also spoken locally and nationally for MCN, of course, also Minnesota Council on Foundations, Idealware, N10, which is the National Technology Education Network. If you're not familiar with them, definitely check them out, and the Forum, among other organizations. So done a lot of speaking far and wide, and I'm happy to share some ideas and some experiences here with you today. A little bit about Copilot. So first of all, we are a boutique web development firm, which is just like a fancy way of saying small. But what's nice about being small is that it does keep our overhead low and kind of allows us to be nimble about, how we tailor projects to suit our clients' needs instead of sort of saying, we've got all of these resources, we have these tools that we use, we better do and use all of these things on every engagement or else. So it's kind of nice, being right size, I would say, to partner with small, medium, and even large organizations whose needs are appropriate, for the work that we do. So established in 2012, so been in operation for over 10 years now, and woman owned by me, of course. Like you have already gotten very strongly. We've got a strong focus on the nonprofit sector. And we are based in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and do work out of both Coven locations. So that's pretty fun. Great community to be plugged into there. Our specialties are in WordPress and Squarespace, and we're going to talk more about platforms primarily actually in part 2 of this series. But long story short, I like focusing on both of those things, because I find that really it covers the spectrum of needs that most nonprofits have. Squarespace, of course, is one of those tools that's more like a website builder, as it's called in the biz. So you can really create beautiful things quickly if someone has pretty simple needs. And WordPress, on the other hand, can be used to create simple websites, but really where it shines is when you have more sophisticated needs, maybe a higher level for custom design, things like that. So it's nice to have a range of offerings to meet people's needs in an appropriate way. You don't want to kind of give people too much website for what they need. Another thing that we've just launched is Copilot Care, which I'm very excited about. If you happen to be a WordPress user already, hopefully it's really been impressed upon you that it's really important to maintain that website, make sure that everything is backed up and upgraded on a continuous basis, and also patched with some of the security patches that need to be done in order to kind of cover your bases with a software like that. So long story short, I created this ongoing support service. It's a monthly service where folks can, get that support at a reasonable cost. So if that is something that sounds like it might be of interest to you, definitely check out the website where we've got more information on that. All right, great. So what are we talking about today? So again, this is all about preparing you to have a successful website redesign. What do you need to prepare for? Well, first of all, you need to determine your readiness. Are you prepared is kind of the first big question. And if you're not, what are the possible blind spots that you might not be aware of? So I've got a whole laundry list of different things that would be good to touch in about before you actually embark on this journey. And then second of all, we've got step 2, which is defining your needs. It's a very human impulse, I think, to jump to solutions, thinking, oh gosh, we need X platform and Y, plugin, and we need these pages and yada yada. That's a lot of work that is often best done in conversation with a web developer. Because, it's okay. You're not a web agency yourself. You don't necessarily know what tools are out there, and you shouldn't have to be an expert in those things. What you need to be an expert in is really what your goals are and who you're trying to connect with, and what your mission and your messages are to communicate to the world. And hopefully, if you establish the right relationship with a web development partner, they can help you identify possible solutions that you might not have even dreamed of. So defining your needs is all about a process that I typically take with people who approach me for a potential, web development engagement, that helps me kind of get beyond what we call the presenting need in, the consulting world to what the goals are behind that. And then from there, again, we can talk about those opportunities that might arise from that process. So I've got a handy document that's going to help you see those opportunities and document those things, which you can then shop around to potential web development partners, which is super useful. Okay, great. So determining your readiness. Let's talk about the aspects. All right, so what is in our readiness checklist? So the first element, of course, is leadership buy-in. No surprise there. Hopefully, if you're watching this, your executive is already on board with the idea that you need to make this investment in an updated website, but you might not be. My best recommendation for folks who are just starting this journey is to start the conversation early so you can kind of figure out what is the reality on the ground, what are the things that you have to basically negotiate around to get this to happen. Another kind of very nerdy, wonky thing that I'm going to share with you is this idea of, considering talking to your finance person and your executive director and getting them to really begin seeing the website as something that's called an amortized asset. That is a wonky term, but basically what it means is shifting your website from a one-time business expense to an expense that basically is depreciated over a certain amount of time, like 3 years, for instance. This is something that's super common to do with like laptops and computers and office equipment and things like that. And what's nice about it is that it basically presupposes, okay, we've made this investment in this tool. We know that in 3 to 5 years, whatever period you choose, we are going to have to make another investment in that thing again. Now, it doesn't always happen that way necessarily. Budgets are budgets. And they're always, fortunately, restricted by reality. However, this sort of psychological shift can be incredibly useful for you or for whomever is going to be in your position in the future, because it helps the organization have readiness, have a sense of, okay, this isn't a one thing that we're going to do once and then use forever, which nobody really thinks is true. But this is sort of a living thing that we're going to have to reinvest in, whether that means sort of reinvigorating what we have or, completely pitching it out and doing something new on a periodic basis. So that is kind of a wonky conversation, but it is something that I think is super useful in terms of helping you get around some of the roadblocks that there might be in the future to renewing this crucial aspect of your online communications. So a couple of tips there. The next up, of course, is staff buy-in, and we're going to talk about at least one tactic to help you get started down the path of staff buy-in. But this is just looking around the organization and asking yourself, like, okay, who do I need to be bought into this idea of doing a new website in order to make it happen? And generally what that means is, just having one-on-one conversations with folks saying like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think are the opportunities to create a site that's going to help you do your work better, help you communicate about your program more effectively? How could this tool actually help you? And priming the pump and having those conversations up front really helps you understand needs even beyond communications and marketing and fundraising, which is probably the perspective that you're coming from naturally, to opportunities that really can tie back to needs across the organization. And it also gets people excited and it gets them willing, to answer their email when you are asking them for content. So it kind of helps build that hunger and that appreciation that, updating this isn't just an inconvenience. This is really going to help everybody do the work more effectively. So that is a great place to start. Staff time. This is also really valuable to be thinking about. Creating a website, of course, takes time, particularly if you are not outsourcing the content development. So I think it's great to have a conversation, before you start even doing the work to say, okay, once we get into this, it's going to take, 2 to maybe 6 months. I mean, who knows, depending on the complexity. What can I let go of? Looking at the things that I have to do, how can we switch things around so that I've got the capacity to actually get this work done? And that's super valuable because one of the things that cause budgets to inflate and scopes to go over is just not having the internal staff capacity to get that work done, because then the timeline drags on and things don't happen, and then the money accrues. So, having that conversation and just acknowledging the very obvious reality that this is going to take time and you're going to have to prioritize some things, I think is super healthy to do up front. And then, you could also have the conversation about, okay, do we have potential budget to outsource some of the writing to a professional writer who knows things like search engine optimization to help you, continue to do your work, but also move this along at a good, healthy pace. So great conversation to have up front. Next up is branding. This is a big pitfall for organizations. What I would recommend is, okay, so usually there are aspects about a brand that people do not like, heavens knows. That being said, really what you want to ask yourself at this point of web development process before you even begin is there a risk that we are going to stop the web development project because we decide that we totally have to redo the brand, get a new logo, get a new colors, etc. During that process? It doesn't happen a lot, but it has happened, particularly when I was early on in my career and just kind of wanted to go with the flow. If people said like, "Oh yeah, we're updating the brand simultaneously," I was more receptive to that idea, but quickly learned that it's just not smart. It's better to go at a project with even an outdated but flawed brand rather than something that is completely an unknown. So if you think you're going to be doing this, definitely do the branding first and then engage the web development partner after to help you create a beautiful website with that new brand or that updated brand. That being said, hopefully, any web development project is an opportunity for you to maybe expand or extend your brand in some appropriate ways. By creating graphics that might be, working on the website and stuff like that. So there's an opportunity sometimes for the web development process and the design aspect of it to inform the existing brand and kind of extend it. But certainly it's not an opportunity to blow up the box and redo your logo while you're actually also trying to do the web development project. So think carefully about this before you proceed further. Next up is messaging. Messaging is a little easier to pivot if you need to, of course. Content management systems, good, reliable, modern ones will largely help you and allow you to easily update content. That being said, sometimes if you are going through a strategic planning process, if you're sort of shifting the mission, vision, values, repositioning the organization, it is often smart, if you can, to kind of approach a new web development project after you get that into place so that you don't have to do any rework, where the content is concerned. So, not as essential as getting the brand, really set first, but certainly an opportunity to save time if you can get that out of the way before you begin your work. All right, next up is photography. So in a perfect world, I would love every nonprofit to have like $1,000 set aside each year for them to hire a professional photographer and, stage some photos, take some photos at events, that kind of thing. Not everybody has the resources to do that. But that being said, even the scrappiest organization, can, maybe recruit a volunteer photographer for this purpose. My point is, if you have sort of a robust archive of your own, what I like to call stock photography, for lack of a better description, it is going to make it so much easier for your web developer to bring to life the important organization and mission and community that you serve. So I would really recommend actually looking at creating this as a yearly practice, really updating this stock archive of your own photos. But in lieu of that, at least understanding that it would be a good thing to invest, before you do a new web development project. And if you can't do that, it can be a great opportunity during the web development project to do some photography to kind of fill in the gaps that you might have. And I certainly think it's worth the investment just because the caliber of the photos that you get from someone who, either if they're a hobbyist or a professional person, the equipment, the eye, the editing that you get, it's just going to create a different sense of professionalism on the site for the work that you do. So that is my recommendation. There are also, of course, stock photos, actual stock photos that you can buy, free, royalty-free ones that are out there as well. Those are useful. In a best case scenario, of course, it's always better to tell your story with your own photos. So something that I'd love for you to start a conversation about within your organization sooner rather than later. All right, and then the next up is budget. Of course, making sure that you have enough money set aside in the budget. And this is one of those tricky sort of chicken or the egg scenario where it's like, I don't know how much it's going to cost to do the website until I talk to people, but I can't talk to web developers until I understand what we need, and it becomes this whole sort of messy inception of unknowns. I do have some recommendations in part 2 of this 2-part series about how to approach getting budget numbers from people. So stay tuned for that. But of course, having an understanding of at least what the range is and whether or not the range that you have is appropriate in broad brushstrokes is going to make this whole process go a lot more smoothly. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about defining your needs and my recommended process of going about that. So how do you define your needs? The first thing I would recommend is not to sit down and create a website outline. It's an understandable impulse to be like, okay, we're doing a new website. What are the pages going to be? However, this is one of those tricky things where, unless you have a lot of expertise about things like search engine optimization, things like accessibility, if you get too married to a certain site outline that you have created without the aid of a web developer, basically you can put yourself in a position where you're not structuring the website basically optimally to have that website perform at its best, connect with audiences that are searching on search terms related to your mission, that kind of thing. So heading down that pathway of figuring out those specific pages and how they're arranged, I don't think it's honestly worth your time. For me as a web developer, what I would love for everybody to do is to actually fill out a creative brief before they ever go down a pathway of, thinking about, specific plugins or platforms or pages even. So what the heck is a creative brief? So basically a creative brief is a document that's super common in the marketing realm. It allows you to sit down and really think in big ways about what the goals of your website are, who your audiences are, and the specific actions that you'd like them to take on the website that would be expressive of success on those goals. And that kind of high-level thinking, really helps you define the purpose of your website in such a way that the right developer partner will be able to take that and then suggest technological solutions that you may not have even dreamed of because you're not a professional web developer. So it's really, I think, a wonderful way to approach that conversation without, pigeonholing yourself into a certain idea, in your head about, hey, it's got to be this way. So we're going to take a look at a creative brief template that I am making free and available to you so that you can use it basically as a worksheet for internal conversations around the website project. We will be taking a tour of that next. All right, so before you create this creative brief, what I recommend is also thinking about who might be on your web team. Generally, for these projects internally, I find that it's nice to have between 2 and 4 people potentially who are within the organization who can make week-to-week decisions about the web development project. There's probably going to be one specific point person, and if you're listening to this, it's probably going to be you. But the web team is there to help you, understand aspects of the organization that you might not understand because they're from maybe different departments, that kind of thing, and execute on at least some of that work on a week-to-week basis. So, think about those people internally whose work sort of touches the website in different ways. So it might be, the communications, fundraising team, and then also maybe, somebody from the admin team who's responsible for various databases that might intersect with the website, things like that. Figuring out who those people are is a great way to start this conversation so that when you create this creative brief and define your needs, you're thinking more globalistically about what those needs are across the organization and not only just the marketing and the fundraising side of things, which of course is important and probably, has primacy over a lot of things, but certainly isn't the only opportunity to make the best use of your website. All right. In the previous step, I talked about staff engagement. In addition to engaging other staff by inviting them to join the web team, there's also an opportunity here to conduct a staff survey. And it doesn't have to be fancy. I actually have an example of a staff survey that you can even adapt. That'll be another freebie that I will offer to you. But basically, this is just a simple form that you can use to ask people some guided questions relating to the website as it is currently and as it could be, in the future, to help them do their work more effectively. It's a wonderful way to cast a broader net before you kind of get deep into a web development process, so you can unearth some of the pain points that really need to be accounted for to have a successful result. So certainly, do a survey, see what comes out of it, set it up in such a way so that you can follow up with people if you need to about any specific ideas or any specific concerns that they might have. All right, and then a front desk team interview. Basically, what I'm trying to get at with this idea is that there is a wealth of information that you can unlock if you talk to the people who are answering the phones at your organization. And that can be like literally they answer the phone, or it could mean, they're answering the info at email address. Just those people who are kind of the frontline folks who are most frequently connecting with the public. They often have a wonderful sense of what the website that you currently have is not doing for you, because they are that first line of, recourse that people have if the website is not answering their questions or meeting their needs. And another sort of aspect sort of tied into this is also really oftentimes figuring out how to pre-qualify people who really are the right folks to engage with your services. So for instance, I've worked with a ton of foundations. One of them is the Minnesota Disabled Veterans Organization, and they do a lot of incredible work, but they help the helpers, right? However, even though that's the case, because their website is pretty easy to find online, if you search for Minnesota Veterans, you're going to find that, or at least they found, that they were always challenged with people who, were basically veterans who needed help. And they struggle to kind of connect people quickly with those resources because they're an entirely volunteer-run organization. So we did a lot of careful thinking around setting up their website so that we could appropriately redirect people to the many agencies who are actually doing the work of helping people firsthand. So this is the type of insight that having these front desk interviews can give you. What are people asking about? Where are there inefficiencies because these front desk people are answering the same darn questions over and over again? How can we use this website to answer those questions proactively so you can hopefully cut down on some of that extraneous work? These are all wonderful insights that you can glean by having these conversations up front. All right, so next up, we're going to take a tour of our sample creative brief, and I'm going to flip over to Microsoft Word so I can show you that document. All right, well, let's take a little tour of this website creative brief. So first of all, I will just say, this is not only like an internal document to align the rest of the web team around what you want to do with the website. This is also something that hopefully you can share with potential web partners, sometimes in lieu of an RFP, which we'll talk about later in part 2. So it does sort of ask you to define some aspects of who you are and what you do that are hopefully pretty obvious, to everybody who's on the web team. So might seem a little redundant, but add this information here because it's going to help a potential partner. All right, so we've got project manager, that would likely be you, your current web team members, your organization's mission, and then where it starts to get really good, you've got your website goals. So with these goals, I recommend keeping them broad. Again, not attaching them to specific pages or specific website solutions or tools, but instead, saying things like, we want to increase our sponsorships. We want to raise our visibility. We want to showcase the expertise of our providers, if you're a clinic, that kind of thing. These high-level things often can connect directly to your strategic plan, which is great. And they're also broad enough, again, so that there's enough sort of daylight in this document, enough sort of open space for a potential technical partner to recognize opportunities for achieving those goals that you might not even be able to imagine right now. That's where the fun stuff happens, that's where the magic happens. So keep them broad. You're going to thank yourself later. All right, next up, we've got audiences and user actions. This is where you can get more specific about at least what things you'd like people to do on the website and how those things relate to your website goals. So with audiences, what we're talking about is, who are we trying to communicate with on this website? If you're saying everybody, the general public, everybody who cares about X issue, you're probably going to fall flat, because the more specific you can be about who you're talking to, the better you can serve them, the better you can optimize your content and your capabilities on the website to actually make them take action. So that being said, write out who you're trying to connect with, be as specific as possible about those people, and also be mindful of your priorities. A website only has so much real estate on a page, and especially if we're talking about things sort of above the fold, so to speak. And so, knowing who your priorities are and having maybe hard conversations about who we're really trying to talk to here can help you make sure that you're not emphasizing, the wrong thing. And it can also help you make sure that you're not making the mistake of basically recreating your org chart, on your website. And, just sort of dividing up a patchwork of content and pages, to satisfy more political needs within the organization rather than actual strategic needs that are grounded in your mission and what users actually want to engage with. So prioritizing, spelling out those audiences, figuring out what they're going to do on the website, all of these things are super useful. And when I talk about user actions, really what I'm talking about here is it can't be specific. I recommend, again, not timed tools, but I'm talking about things as specific as we want people to be able to register for fundraising events. We want people to be able to, see and search a directory of our providers or that kind of thing. Talking about those activities is important, and you're still, hopefully, if you're talking about activities, leaving enough room for people to think of different ways and solutions for you to make those activities possible for people to do. Great. Next up, we've got key messages. This just relates to any specific messaging that's perhaps come out of your strategic planning process that you want to make absolutely sure the website communicates in some ways. You might actually just note, hey, we've got this updated mission, vision, values document, and include that as an attachment if you're shopping this around to potential collaborators. So this is just a valuable place to note those things that you absolutely need to make sure are accounted for in your messaging or big shifts in your messaging that people should be aware of. Next up is design strategy. So perception, tone, guidelines. What am I talking about here? Overall, I think it's nice to have a conversation about the emotional experience that you want people to have on a website. And so just sitting down and talking about a bunch of adjectives really can be useful because it can help you communicate to a designer in particular what kind of vibe you want people to feel when they come on the website. Do you want them to feel a sense of playfulness or a sense of maybe professionalism? Do you want the tone to be sort of a conversation with your smartest best friend, or do you want it to be a conversation with an academic? having an understanding of that emotional experience and just writing down some words that help convey that experience is going to be helpful for a lot of reasons. So, and it's a fun conversation, I think, to have internally. So do that. And then guidelines, basically what I'm pointing at here is this idea of, if you have some kind of style guide, just noting that you actually have a style guide. You might not have a document that, expresses your current brand, your fonts, your required colors, all that good stuff. But if you can do any legwork in advance to pull that stuff together, that's going to make it a lot easier for your web developer to do their work. So good to note here, so they can kind of understand your readiness vis-a-vis design. All right, and then additional deliverables or services to provide. This is just a nice place to note any extra things that you might want assistance with. Sometimes folks have assumptions about kind of what goes into a web development process and what they're going to get out of it. So putting explicit things in here like, gosh, we really need to, have a copy of all the photographs that you use on the website, or we would like to be able to use any additional things like patterns that you create, graphics, etc. in Canva, and can you upload them to Canva for us? Or we would like to work with someone who can also produce, a brochure for us. All of these things are super helpful to understand the outcomes that you're looking for, or to be mindful of different artifacts that you'd like to get from that collaboration in advance. Okay, cool. Technology ecosystem. That's just a fancy way of saying, PC or Mac. So understanding that is useful. Other things to document if you're Office 365 or Google Workspace. Are you using a donor database? Are you using a volunteer database? What are those sort of services and databases that might in some way connect with the website? So, again, that might include the things I've described. It might also include something like your email service provider, like MailChimp or Constant Contact, whatever you happen to be using. Adding those things in here is super great because, again, sometimes there's extra work that needs to be done to make sure that those systems talk to the website, or opportunities to integrate those systems that you might not be aware of. So super cool to document those things for a potential partner. Desired launch date. This is something, I say desired for a reason. This is something that you might have to revise, basically based on your wish list and also the availability of your potential web development partner. So nice to record in some way, but just know that you'll probably have to negotiate on this at some point. But it's a good expectation to share. And then budget range. Again, this is tough because you don't really know what something's going to cost you until you kind of get some estimates from people and sort of have some conversations. But at the same time, if there are certain internal realities that you are working with right now, like, gosh, the executive already set aside X amount of money, and that's the pot that we've got at least this year, documenting that can be super helpful. And of course, you can always revise this document later. So you might not start this conversation with an idea of what your budget range is, but after you've talked to a couple of experts out there, you might have an actual range that, has been approved by the board, that kind of thing. So, open space for that detail when you have it. And then, of course, just a free space for other considerations that might impact the project. So, for instance, gosh, if you're some kind of healthcare provider and you might be audited, or you have your one big fundraiser of the year on a certain date, and that's going to impact the timeline potentially, or someone's going on maternity leave. It could be any number of things, but it's just a good thing to think about. Okay, what are those extra sort of somewhat unforeseen things that we should probably document, before actually beginning an engagement? So that is what that free space is for. All right, so we have just taken a tour of our creative brief, and now you are welcome to download your own copy. So this is on my website, edgopilot.org/webinar. You might already be there. If you're not, if you're watching this on YouTube or something, feel free to use that handy dandy QR code to easily navigate to that page on your phone. Yeah, hopefully it's super useful to you. What I find is often great is basically using this as a starting point with potential web development partners. So this can be kind of your RFP light before you go into more serious conversations about this project. So hope you use it, hope you get a lot of help from it. All right, so that has been our presentation, our part one of this series. We have been taking a look at determining readiness for a website redesign and also successfully defining your needs. Part two is going to be great. I hope you stick around for it. We are going to be talking about budgets, which is a sticky, scary subject. So we're going to be taking a look at that. And then we're also going to be talking about, okay, once you have your budget, how do you actually find the right web developer? What are some of the questions that would be good to ask them to make sure that they know their stuff and they're really accounting for all of your needs kind of holistically, because creating a website is really just the beginning. So I hope you will join me for part two. Also, if you have any questions, absolutely feel free to reach out. I am always happy to connect people with resources, whether that be resources that we provide or other folks in the community. There's a great, vibrant network of folks locally and nationally who are supporting nonprofits with their technology needs, so I am always happy to do that. So please do not be shy, and hope to see you in part number two. Thank you.